Hey now, it's Dave Lorenzo, the godfather of growth, and today we have a fantastic interview for you. That's right, Nikki G and I are speaking with Charlie Janes, who is a business coach and also an exit planning advisor here in South Florida. It's a great interview, and I'm really excited to bring it to you. Before we do that, I want to let you know that because you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, you may not know that there's also a video version of the podcast. That's right. This podcast is available as a video as well. Every Wednesday, when Nicola and I record the interviews for the Inside BS show, we also produce a video. Sometimes it's live and in person, and sometimes it's recorded remotely. So if you want to see the video, just go to YouTube and type in Inside BS show with the Godfather and Nikki G, and it'll come right up for you. Search for it on YouTube. I know that some of you like to listen to Nikki G and me when you're walking the dog or washing the dishes, but others prefer to have a visual experience. And I'm all about the visual experience for you. So if you want to see us on YouTube, be sure and type in Inside BS Show with the Godfather and Nikki G. We'd love to catch you on YouTube as well as have you listen to us every day at 6 a.m. here on the audio show. Thanks for joining us, and here's the interview with exit planning advisor Charlie Janes.
Attention business owners, how does this business end for you? Join us to talk all about your exit planning on this edition of the Inside BS Show. Hey now, I'm Nikki G. This is the Inside BS Show, and we're here to talk all about exit planning today. We have a special guest for you that we'll introduce shortly, a fellow exit planner and business strategist, and we are very excited to have him on the show. Before I do that, let me bring on my co-host, the Godfather of Growth, Dave Lorenzo. Dave, good morning. How are you?
Hey now, Nikki G. Good morning. How are you today?
I am great. Wow, this is the amount of energy we have when we're doing back-to-back meetings. Loving it.
Oh, it is so great to be here, and I can't wait to find out who our guest is. You did an incredible job teasing who our guest is. People are swerving off the road right now because they can't wait to find out who the guest is. You know, I got to tell you, this topic is one that until 2 years ago, I don't think I heard anybody say until they were ready to get out of their business. Like, hey, they come up to me and go, hey, do you know anybody? I think I'm done and I just want to get rid of my business. But then 2 years ago, all of a sudden, the idea of thinking about the end of your business when you're starting your business, or thinking about planning your business so that you have the most options when your business ends for you, it has really come to the forefront. And I think part of the reason, and we can ask our guest this, I think part of the reason is because as a society, everybody's gotten a lot older, right? We're hearing about this silver wave and all these baby boomers who are looking to leave their businesses. I think that's what kind of clued people in that, hey, this might become a thing, because now everywhere you turn, you can't swing a dead cat without somebody being a certified something or other in the exit planning space. So I'm really excited for our conversation today.
So am I, and I can't agree more, Dave. I think because a few studies came out showing the number, just the volume of businesses that are going to be sold in the coming decade. So it is now front and center, and everyone thinks that we've just now fallen into discussing eventual exits. It's been around a lot longer than that. So we've got a great person to speak to about that, who shares our passion. So at this point, I'd love to bring our guest on. Charlie Janes, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
I am glad to be here, and according to Dave, it's just in time. You know, Dave, you talked about that silver wave of people. It turns out that we're past the halfway point in the bell curve. The greatest generation has exited their business, or the baby boomers, which I'm one of, and now we're right smack in the middle of Gen Xers. But the way they plan for their exits are very different. So it's a good thing for us to talk about today.
So Charlie, tell us, let's start from the beginning, kind of how you even got into this.
Well, I've kind of had like a Forrest Gump kind of tech career. I spent 30 years in Silicon Valley growing tech companies. I was lucky enough to grow with three organizations that I led from 0 to 100 million. And those companies that I worked for were in bigger companies that got bought by Oracle and IBM and Workday and PTC, and they were all billion-dollar exits. And the people I worked for, the men, the women that I worked for were brilliant. They went on to start companies like Amazon Web Services and Netflix and Trinet. And I did a lot of startups along the way. And what I found out was that I really enjoyed developing the people. As a matter of fact, the people that worked for me generally did better than I did. So that's how I became a coach.
Yeah, Charlie, let's talk about that, right? So you gravitated toward helping people grow and improve their businesses. And I want you to do me a favor and do the people who are with us today, listening and watching, a favor and explain the difference between what you do and what, say, like a life coach does. And then we'll break it down even further, what you do and the intimate relationship you have with your clients compared to sort of a more generic, which is not a bad thing, but a more generalized, business education process. So first start with the difference between what you do and what like a life coach does.
Yeah, thanks. There's so many different types of coaches, but I'm a certified business growth coach and I'm also a certified exit coach. So that's much more specific than life. So my owners care about things like increasing their profits, increasing their revenues, building stronger teams and systems, or developing executives that want to make more money, do more in better time, be better leaders. So it's very specific, and I actually license curriculums that certified me, but materials I use with those people. Life coaches, as an example, are quite a bit more broad, but they tend to be focused more on the health of the person, their health, their emotions, and things like that. And I don't get near that because I can be a mess myself.
All right, now talk about the difference between your style and the way you approach this in a customized, bespoke, one-on-one method, as opposed to just a more broad, generalized business coaching scenario.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I actually leverage four different coaching systems that I've been certified on, and they're like a surgeon's tools. But for business coaching, I take people through multiple modules they usually take more than a year. And the first module is all about what you would call clarity. I'm sure most of you have heard that from anybody who's a coach, including a life coach. But understanding where you're at, where you want to be, what your values are, what your mission is, that's all part of that. And ultimately cultivates in a personal and business strategic plan. And then my growth program goes through organizational design, learning how to delegate and learning how to manage time and things like that. Then it's the marketing, then it's the sales, and then ultimately it's how to be a great leader. So it's a year-long program that some of my clients go through. I have a couple clients have been at it with me for 3 years. And the reason why they keep coming back is that even if we repeat, what used to work stops working. And a lot of times, what owners need, besides a coach with a plan, is they need someone to bounce ideas off of because they're overwhelmed with the number of decisions that they have to make, the constant decisions, and the changing circumstance. And that's really why you need a coach.
Do your clients, Charlie, go through each of those modules you're discussing, or they go through, like they come to you and they go through a particular one because maybe they need help in that area versus the others?
Yeah, so I do things in all different kinds of orders. I meet my clients where they're at. But what I typically tell all of them is don't start coaching if you're not going to invest a good 6 months because change requires habit and habit requires repetition. So, but what I'll do is I'll focus the parts of the program that are most relevant to them and then I'll agree to a cadence that works for them, which is typically weekly but can be bi-weekly. Sometimes I meet with clients for an hour, but it can be a half hour. I even got one client that I meet with 15 minutes daily.
Oh
Ah,
wow, 15 minutes daily. That's pretty intense. I want to, and I want to put a pin in that because we'll come back to that in a minute. Charlie, tell us about you and your career, and what in your career gave you the clarity to say, I'm the guy who people come to bounce ideas off of. How did you recognize that in yourself? Because I'm the older I get, the more self-aware I become, right? Maybe it's probably 20 years of marriage and being worn down to a little nub. But besides that, I think as I experience more in business, I become more aware of myself of the things that I'm strong in and the things that I need to support myself in where I don't have areas of strength. How did you recognize a strength in yourself that led you to be the person to say, I'm really good at listening and reflecting back to people where they can grow and improve. How did you recognize that?
It's so great that you pointed that out, because usually when a business coach tells their story to prospective clients, we tell all the victories, but that's not where the battle is won. It's all the times that you fail and you come up short. In my case, I had a very strong early career working for these visionaries that created the companies I described. And I learned so much about what matters in leadership. And for a long time, I coasted along. Like my $100 million jobs were all in the beginning of my career before I passed 35. And then as I got older, I started working for earlier stage startups that were riskier. And sometimes they didn't have the investors or the founder who had the kind of ethics that I originally worked with. And what happened to me is that over time, that drive to succeed that's inherent in me started becoming a negative. And my leadership started becoming more about what I needed to get done when I took over a new team and my desire to turn them around for my ego. My emotional intelligence actually decreased. Most of you don't know that emotional intelligence isn't something you're born with, it's something you develop. And while it was being developed as being part of a great team, I was truly great. But I would say by the time that I got to my late 40s and 50s, especially in Silicon Valley, where they start telling you you're too old, we don't want to hire you because we're a young company or our people are, well, that does something to somebody. So when I realized the way some of my coaching had degraded and some of my leadership degraded, that's when I wanted to study it and become a coach. So about 5 years ago, my wife pretty much gave me the hook and said it was time to retire. And literally within a couple weeks of that decision, we had loaded up our car, sold our house in Silicon Valley, drove east looking all over the place. And I started looking at coaching certification programs, and I started becoming the leader I want to be all over again by helping people understand that health comes from good habits.
So tell us about the certifications you have, because you've now mentioned those a couple times, and I suspect you will tell us that's a differentiating factor for you as someone who does what you do. So tell us a little bit about the certifications you have and what they provide to you, the value that they really have provided to you in your work.
Thanks, Nikki. I have a unique background in the sense that having grown multiple businesses through the cycle from the ground up to 100 million, I've done the individual job, the manager of managers up to the C level, dealing with investors and funding. So I know the cycle. So therefore I had the platform to be broad. And what really makes me different is I am broad. I'm certified as a business coach that knows how to work with owners or investor teams. I do about 25% of my work with executives that want more in less time. But I've also expanded out to working with teams. So I used Focal Point for my business and executive coaching. They're one of the oldest and best known coaching companies in the world. I use the entrepreneurial operating system for getting entire teams on a cadence to scale, and that's a common methodology. And then recently, and I also use Value Builder to do valuations and do exit coaching, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about today. But the most recent thing I added was positive intelligence, which is mindset coaching, starting to get into the area of what life coaches do, but focusing on the habits and the mental psychology and the brain physiology to help owners untrack themselves and be happier and get more done.
Okay, Charlie. So I said we were gonna put a pin in selecting and deciding which coaching methodology you picked and that sort of thing. So let's dig into it right now. So for those people who are out there and they're listening to this because they saw coaching was in the title of the show and they're looking for a coach, right? With selecting a coach and a methodology, you mentioned 6 months. And I understand why you said 6 months because it seems like a commitment, but it's not like a huge commitment. I'm going to say to people who are out there, listen, 6 months is like you're just scratching the surface. Like if that's what your plan is, what you're looking for is you're looking for somebody that you can basically that you can connect with, that you can talk to about your problems, who is not your client, because you never want to tell your problems to your client because your work with your client is all about the client. It's not your spouse, because the minute you start telling your problems to your spouse, both of you are losing sleep instead of just you losing sleep, and nobody wants that, right? And it's not your team, because you can't tell your problems to your team because, again, you want them to be confident and move forward. And, quite frankly, some of the problems that you have are going to involve your team. So your coach is the person who you can share these challenges with, who will help you navigate these waters, partially because they have the experience, but mostly because they've been trained, conditioned, and they have the experience in listening and helping you think critically and clearly about the problems. So, explain to the folks who are with us why Focal Point and the other certifications you have makes a lot of sense along these lines, right? Because this is what you've been focused and trained to do. So explain why Focal Point makes the most sense for that.
Well, what I loved about what you said, Dave, is listening. I'm not a consultant. I don't tell people what to do. I'm not as smart as most of my clients, quite honestly. Driven, ambitious people who start businesses have a lot of magic around them. But every business owner gets stalled at predictable stages. What I liked about Focal Point was, one, the breadth of the methodology built on 20 or 50 years of Brian Tracy's studies. Those of you that remember Brian Tracy, he used to be the world's best known business coach. He used to speak to stadiums of 10,000 people who came for his wisdom. Well, he codified all of that wisdom based on generations before him, like authors like Napoleon Hill, on modules and best practices, and essentially a journey for growth. What I love about Focal Point is it provides me, the coach, an experienced practitioner, a surgeon's list of tools, scalpels, exercises, short readings, learnings, assessments that my owners can use just when they need them. But Dave, you nailed it. I never tell them, even when they ask, what they should do. My job is to ask questions that help them uncover possibilities that they never dreamed of, but then give them a follow-up methodology, which is where you said the 6 months is really child's play. Usually, evolution of a business happens over many years, even a decade. So having a coach that can go through a long period of time with you in that consistency, but driving those initial impulses and ideas that you get as an epiphany, picking the best of them and implementing them effectively, I'll even say mercilessly, so that you achieve the results, you gain momentum, the flywheel moves faster, and you move on to the next challenge.
Charlie, do us a favor. So people listening might be thinking, like, how do I even know when I might need to talk to someone about what's going on in my business? So give us some examples of when business owners come to you. They are coming to you with X, and give us just some examples of the problems they come to you with that has at least caused them to trigger that thought that, hey, I might need to engage somebody else who can really help me through what I'm going through.
Nikki, there's the surface level issues, that the symptoms that they see first, that the revenues are stalled at the same amount for the last 3 years, even though they're working harder. And almost always the profits are going down, even though they're only doing the same thing. Or the team has a lot of conflict. We hear over and over again everywhere, I can't hire good people that have my values. And I can't build a team of people who run the business like I would run it when I'm not there. And then finally, they'll say things like, I'm scared about what my future looks like. I don't know how I'm going to extract my net worth from the business or prepare my son to take, or my daughter, hopefully, to take the business over. Those are the symptoms. But you know what we're really hearing, Nikki? And I know you and Dave know this because you guys are phenomenal people. It's fear. It's fear and concern about all the change and all the pace of change and competition and everything we read on social media and in the newspaper. It's making us an anxious society, and no one is more anxious than an ambitious, talented business owner that wants to be their best. So generally, what a good coaching relationship will do is that you'll in that session isolate those fears and develop tools to deal with them so that you're not living in fear all the time and that you're embracing your day and you're spending the day being your best. And a good coach acting as a guide or a Sherpa can help get you there quicker. And if you're dealing with a good coach, most of them will have a couple consultations with you gladly at no charge because most of us are in it because we truly want to help. And in my case, I offer a 100% money back guarantee.
Well, and that's, the thing about the consultations up front is we're in the relationship business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like us as consultants and you as a coach, nothing happens unless there's a bond of trust there. And we're not selling vacuums. So you can't take it home and throw some dirt on the floor and see if it works. And if it doesn't, you bring it to the UPS store and send it back to Amazon. Like, people don't want to do that with an emotional investment like they make in you. So that emotional investment has to come before the financial investment. So that's why it makes sense to have a couple of conversations with the person before making the commitment. Before we get into, I want to talk about exit planning, but before we get into that, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't do this. And this is the place to take people and give them the inside BS and take them behind the scenes. You and I both hate when you're really good at selling. You have a very soft, convincing nature about you. I'm very straightforward, and I'm gonna put it in their face and get them to make a decision. But I know from talking to you that you and I both hate it when we convince somebody to do something and work with us and like take our guidance, like in consulting, take our guidance, and you in coaching agree to work with you. But then it was a heat of the moment thing, and they're not really feeling it, and they're not really committed. So what do you do, Charlie, to make sure that your clients are firmly committed to making a change, right? Because they have to be committed to changing in order to get the most out of a relationship with you. How do you determine if somebody's really committed to making a change?
Yeah. So when we have an initial consultation, and I follow a process that, Dave, I think probably is very similar to what you teach in a lot of your consulting. A lot of it's based on, the best practices of Brian Tracy or the Sandler sales training system. But we want the client to achieve a clarity during the conversation. So the first thing we do in the conversation is first we establish rapport. And sometimes we're just not an interpersonal fit. There's certain psychological types that I don't do well with because I am so driven and growth oriented, and I'm a heavy DI and disc parlance. But the main thing we do in any sales conversation is we try to uncover the gap of where they're at and where they want to be. And a lot of times you have to ask questions multiple ways to get it. They'll often talk about a symptom that isn't the problem they want to solve. So hopefully in about a 25-minute conversation, which is usually the first consultation I have, is we understand a clear idea of where I'm here, I want to be there. And then we talk a little bit about the constraints. And I always ask the question, Dave, well, so far, what's keeping you from getting to where you want to go? And I really watch in a 25-minute call, I don't even do Zoom. I purposely do it so that it's simple and it's by phone. But I use that to figure out whether I want to have a second follow-up call with them. And then it's a business review where I send 10 questionnaire, having them more thoroughly lay out the vision that they've painted for themselves. And in that business review, Dave, You already know the answer. You're nodding your head as we're talking. We ask about their whys, about three different ways. And then we ask how it will make them feel. And people that can't describe the vision for what they want probably aren't going to show up a second time for coaching.
Yeah.
So that's the process we go through, and it's pretty efficient though. It's usually done in a 5 minute call, 25 minute call, and then about a 45 minute business review.
So Nicola has a question for you, but before that, I just want to point out how smart it is that and this is a lesson for anybody who sells anything, right? If you purposely delay the decision at least to a point where they have to come back to you at least one time, that's a great, and this is such a great reminder for me that it's so much more powerful if they come back to you the second time, because that shows that they took time and they thought about it after the first call, and they're initiating the next step. You can schedule it during your first call, but the people who aren't interested are either going to cancel or, in a small percentage of cases, not show that second time. But when they show up that second time and they're ready and they're prepared, you know they're going to be ready to go in this process. That's such a great reminder.
That's right. And as one of my favorite mentors used to say, he was a CFO of a publicly traded company, bad news doesn't get better with age. So, the thing is, it's perfectly fine with me. And the other thing that we do, Dave, and I know you do this, is we establish an upfront contract where we basically say how the conversation is going to go. And we agree that if they change their mind after going home and talking to their spouse or their children, or they wake up the next morning with a funny feeling, that they're simply going to let me know. They're not going to have me chase them down and misuse my time. They're going to reward me for what I've given them, and then we're going to be friends, and I'll always help them along the way. But it's okay to tell somebody that I don't want to go forward. You don't want to leave that unsaid.
Yeah, I want to underscore that point, Charlie. It's so important to find the right fit. There's a lot of advisors out there, and Dave and I will tell you, like, if you might not be the right fit for us, and vice versa. And it has to be a mutual decision. So being able to give them the opportunity to do that, those that really align well with you will find you, they'll come back, and they will work with you. And so it's really important to find the right fit, because this is essentially a partner in your journey for planning the rest of your life as a business owner. And it's a big decision.
I got to tell the two of you, I'm an exit advisor, and I want to do business with you for the business exit lab because you guys are so believable and so wonderful.
Well, thank you, Charlie. We appreciate you. And we did not ask him to say that, listeners. Charlie is just very kind. Charlie, so this is a great point to dive into, like, the actual exit planning. We got to get into that for our listeners. And I want to start with, because you are so involved. You're so involved in the exit planning community. I want to start with this. We often get questions about, well, I've heard of like EPI, the Exit Planning Institute, or I've heard of, Exit Advisor Alliance, which you're involved in. Tell us about some of those organizations.
Yeah, so first off, from certification bodies, I really like the Exit Planning Institute, and there's a book called Walking to Destiny, which I'll put up here so you see what it looks like, written by a guy named Christopher Snyder, who was the CEO of that. But it's an education body that does lots of research, and they have lots of surveys, so they have the latest up to date information for any advisor of any type, a coach, an estate planner, a CPA, an M&A person, and they do two things. They push the boundaries of the best practice in the individual disciplines of what's best, but they teach the disciplines how to work together through education and through a chapter system. Another one I like is a lot of the coaching programs, and I would say the Exit Success Lab fits into this as a great resource. Another one is The Art of Selling Your Business by John Warrillow. And in my case, I actually bought a software system for my coaching, or a coaching system called the Value Builder System. It has all the plumbing built for an advisor to do really good initial draft valuations, readiness plans, personal financial plans, everything you need to do to make a prioritized action plan to get started. And then finally, another option for all of you are joining a local chapter. So we mentioned the Exit Planning Institute has chapters all over the U.S. Each one of them operates a little differently based on the needs of those advisors. I recently started a group called the Exit Advisor Alliance in South Florida, where we have chapter meetings that are driven around education and building networks. So you have a lot of choices.
So, and I have to ask this from the business owner's perspective, those who are listening. If I come to these events, Charlie, am I just going to be pitched by people?
Yeah, that's a fair cost. And as a matter of fact, when we invite people to our local chapter meetings, when we invite business owners, they usually turn us down. And they say, that's what I pay my advisor for. However, recognizing that, what we did is we decided to have owner specific events. So in November, we had our first business owners summit, and we had 50 business owners show up plus their advisors. But we specifically said advisors couldn't come if they didn't bring a client, just for that reason.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, Tara. That's a question that, we all we're sensitive to that because we also host events for business owners and we're a very content driven community and we want them to feel comfortable. And I know that you're aligned with us. That's why I wanted to ask you that question.
Well, I think so. And I think that your organization is particularly well suited for meeting the needs of, of the business owners that need the type of coaching. I think you guys provide those regional meetings where it's a perfectly safe environment to learn and not get hit up by a range of other advisors. So that's a service you guys offer all of us.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. We made the decision. So Nicola and I were weighing whether we were going to directly work with and advise these business owners because we had a handful of them come to us, and it was mostly Main Street business owners who were thinking about selling. And then with exposure through Vistage, some lower mid-market business owners had come to us with an eye on selling in the future. And what we've come to understand is there's a hole in the market. There's a lack of a foundational knowledge about how to improve the overall value of the business. So there's people like you who are there to help the owner understand a true CEO mindset, right? Everything you described at the outset of this conversation, and the main reason we wanted to have you on here was to help people understand that if you've got a CEO mindset issue, you need somebody like Charlie Janes to help you. And you need Charlie Janes before you need us. Because if your head isn't screwed on right, there's nothing that we're going to do to help you. You're going to be all over the place. So there's a CEO mindset issue that has to be addressed first. Then there is an entire platform that you can follow, which is what we do, that will help you improve the value of your business. But the CEO mindset issue never goes away. And there's nothing that I don't want to have that conversation with you. That's not my role. I'm not well suited for it. Charlie's well suited for it. Nicola and I are well suited for beating the hell out of you and keeping you on track for making sure that your business continues to grow in value. And then you can go complain to Charlie about how we're beating the hell out of you while your business continues to do well, right? And then there's a separate and totally unique component which you can find in EO, or if you have a big business, YPO, or you can find it in Vistage, or you can find it in Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach Organization. And that's this group coaching opportunity where you occasionally will get a couple of good ideas, but mostly you're there to be part of a community of other business owners who are in the same boat as you, and you can talk to them about, whether you should increase your blood pressure medication because you just can't seem to bring it down, or you're struggling with an interpersonal issue and balancing your work and your family, and you want to talk to other people who've been there. All three of these things work very, very nicely together. And if you're a successful business owner, there's a really good chance you've got Charlie in your world, and there's a really good chance you've got EO or YPO or Vistage in your world. The thing that was missing was this platform that will allow you to sell your business, that will allow you to treat your business like an investment. So when people come to us and they say, "Are you guys coaches?" and I say no, they immediately bristle and they think, "Oh, he doesn't want to be called a coach." I'm not coaching. I'm sharing practices that work for specific things. This is the guy who's coaching you. So Charlie, talk about the things that CEOs struggle with mentally when it comes to an exit. Particularly, you mentioned it earlier, and it's so important, and we don't cover this, the emotional intelligence that people have to have in order to plan for a successful exit, because an exit is like a sudden stop in a car, right? You're preparing, but once it's done, it's done. Like one day you're going in, the next day you're not in many circumstances. So talk about the emotional component of preparing for an exit.
Yeah, such a great topic. 25% of business owners that put their business up for sale sabotage the deal because they're not mentally ready emotionally for it. And you mentioned a great point is that the idea seems so complex, but it's vague. They don't even know what the range of options are to fully or partially sell your business, or to transition it to children or employees, or to sell to a third party fully, or to get investment. And that lack of having that grounding in itself stalls them. They kind of freeze. And in general, in my chapter meetings with other advisors, the one thing the lawyers, the CPAs, the coaches, the M&A people will say is that most business owners do not want to exit plan. It's something that they actively resist. Some of it is because the word scares them. Exit almost sounds too close to something even worse, with death. A lot of your emotional well-being is tied up in who you are as being in a business. So they resist. But here, let me tell you the other side of that is the people that come to me more often than not for exit planning, they're beyond growth, but something has happened. And the Exit Planning Institute calls it the 5 Ds: death, divorce, disability, disagreement, or a disaster. But usually it's the owners just getting a little bit burned out and they want to sell. And by that point, the sales are starting to go down. It is such a slippery slope that by the time that happens, they have a business that is not really transferable for a premium amount of money. As a matter of fact, we should tell these people that only 23% of businesses put up for sale sell, but 80% of most owners' expected net worth is in that business. So there's a huge discrepancy built around the idea that they're afraid to plan. So what all of us are here to say is it's more fun than you think. It's not as hard or as onerous as you fear. It can be done fairly simply in a couple meetings. It doesn't have to be very expensive, but always create a prioritized action plan around how you are going to want to exit in the future, and hopefully 3 to 5 years before you even imagine you're going to sell. And that prioritized action plan should have an initial evaluation of your business and how it can be made more valuable and transferable, a personal readiness plan, imagining your life when you're not being pushed out, but while you're being pulled out by life's next adventure, a new venture, a charity, travel with your spouse, time with your grandkids, and finally a financial plan. You got to know how much you have to get out of that business and how to plan for what it's going to be worth so that you're not overly taxed and that you can support the charities that you want. And if you wait until you're ready to sell, it'll be too late for your tax advisor or your other advisors to help you.
Charlie, you're speaking our language.
Yeah, baby.
Before I want to pick up on this, but before I do so, I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to have you provide an example of a client you've worked with where you worked through kind of emotional component with a business owner. Like, just give us an example, and if you need to change the facts a little bit, we understand, from a confidentiality perspective about that. But I want the audience to truly understand, like how you have the ability to help them when they're stuck in their mindset with something.
And all identities in this story have been obscured. Yeah, great. So I get contacted by all kinds of business, but one that comes to mind was a guy that had a 30-year family manufacturing business, and he was still relatively young. But his VP of sales and his general manager and him, who had known forever, they were just flat. And the business had stalled at $15 million 3 years in a row, even though they were working harder and harder. And they're starting to get a lot of unsolicited offers from businesses that were just lowballs. But what they were afraid was that the industry was consolidating and it was sell now or lose all potential exit later. So we did the valuation and we realized that the offers were definitely about 20% below what even another casual buyer would pay. And they were nowhere near what a financial or a strategic buyer would pay, which usually will give you higher multiples. So the net of it was then we just did a strategic plan with the leadership team and we started smoking out that the other two leaders just really didn't have the energy level, but wanted to be involved with the business. And then we went from there into coaching where we started coaching a new VP of sales that had a lot of energy. So we started ramping up the revenue there. But the big thing was we attracted the owner's wife into the business who had been outside but involved for 30 years. And this person has a ball of energy. And she mandated that the business was going to grow 33% in the next year. And then we built together a growth plan with that, with the new head of sales, and we freed the owner up, who was really kind of burnt out, down running all the details. The wife started taking over those operational businesses, which tasks that she relished, and she started coordinating all the office infighting and streamlining operations. The owner and I put together a list of potential partners who could eventually be acquirers, other suppliers, competitors. We found a couple that we could partner with that would immediately generate $1 million orders and fill in that 33% growth. So that's essentially what happened is the owner transitioned up out of the dirt, up into the fun part of the business. He got replacement help from the wife. His work went from 70 hours a week down to about 35 right now. And our first quarter, they had record growth. And we're pretty confident that we'll grow the business 33% this year. Oh, and the other thing is the valuation came out where we showed them that the business was really probably worth about 6 million and the offers were coming in the threes. We showed them what they could do without growing to make the business worth about 10 million. But with this new growth plan, they'll probably be able to exit the business at around 12 million. So they're going to 4 times their exit value over the next 3 to 5 years, which will generate a legacy beyond anything they ever dreamed of.
Wow, that's fantastic, Charlie. So, and you kind of already led into the next question I wanted to go back to when I said we're gonna come back to this point, which is really like the importance of having a plan. And I appreciate that, business owners they've got their financial wealth tied up in the business. They're scared of the word exit. There's just so many hesitations there on their part that they're not doing the planning well in advance. But I want you to speak to why it's so important, because for reasons like this story you just told, if you didn't have the opportunity to come to someone and to work through this, you wouldn't have seen that massive increase in valuation. The preparation that already has you saying, okay, we can start thinking about a transition or a plan. So tell us, give us your perspective on the importance of this.
Well, first off, it gets back to what we talked about at the beginning of this call is understanding people's why. And a lot of time their why for thinking they want to exit is not really the one that they start off with. It's to escape something rather than to run towards something great. So by understanding your why, your personal readiness about why to exit will lead you to the right choice. Most people think exit means selling to a third party. And I have one case, a construction company, where we figured out that they could get a higher multiple for their exit by becoming an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan, which are really popular for construction companies now based on the dynamics. I had another one where we were sure that we wanted to transition the business to the son, but when we went through the options, we realized that by partnering with a company from out of state that wanted to be in the commercial construction business, and it was a residential, that company would invest 49% ownership, fund the owner's retirement, and the owner could do what he really wanted, which he wanted to get out of managing the field, but he wanted to keep selling for the new joint organization. And he took an employment contract, paying him more than he was paying himself before for the next couple of years. So he got his retirement, employment, a legacy for his son, and someone running the field, all by just having a plan. So that's really the benefits of creating the 3 plans I mentioned. Valuation with a growth plan, personal readiness, and a financial plan with your financial advisor which estimates how much you've got to extract out of the business to make it worth your while.
Okay, so I love this. I love this conversation. So how do you bring it up with a business owner? So you and I are at a cocktail party, and I say, Charlie, I'm going to run to the bar. Let me get you another drink. And I go to the bar, and a business owner comes up to you. How do you start the exit planning conversation with them?
You're so generous because you're the master at this, and you would know exactly how to do it by talking to them about their initial dreams and their hopes, and getting having them paint a picture of the future that they want and the role they see their business in it, and anything that's been holding them back. And a lot of times it's just uncertainty that's holding them back. And they just put the conversation off. So at this point, I'd probably order them a second drink, but then tell them any advice I give them, they should think about again tomorrow. But no, I would, basically what I'd want to do is let them know that this exit planning isn't as complex as it sounds. Matter of fact, that's because I can do it. Generally, we can put together the plan that I've just described in 4 to 6 meetings, half-hour to hour meetings with 3 individual assessments that I use. And the Exit Success Lab probably has different diagnostic tools. But the point is, because we've been down the path multiple times and we've done a lot of study, we can make going down the path for any owner shorter, funner, and more productive.
So how do you differentiate between where people are from a mindset perspective, right? They need coaching, or where they are from a plan perspective. So let's say you have a well-adjusted CEO in front of you who, they've been doing it for a little while. Maybe they have a coach, or maybe they don't have a coach, but they're okay in terms of their mindset. They got a good team around them, but they don't have an exit plan. Just like a successful individual that doesn't have a will or a durable power of attorney or that sort of thing, right? How do you decide as the diagnostician whether you got to talk about mindset and coaching, or whether you need to talk about planning and, the value of the business and where the business is headed?
First off, almost 80% of anybody that's ever hired me as a business owner or an executive has had at least a couple coaches before. As a matter of fact, that's good news for me, because then we're not going backward. But usually they've outgrown them. So in the case of a business owner, usually it might be just information they give in that conversation, like, gosh, I don't know what my business is worth. I've never had it valued. Or, every time I try to have the conversation with my children about taking over the business, things kind of go sideways. So you'll hear a little bit about a pain that's been holding them back from really realizing this vision for where they want to be. And then all of us on this call want to meet them where they're at. And it will usually come down to that gap, getting them more crisp with a couple measures. I want my profit's X. I want it to be Y. I'm working 70 hours a week. I want it to be a lot less than that. My business, I don't know what it's worth, or I know what it's worth. I've been getting lowball. I need to grow the business to 10 million so I can pocket X. Once we can get to that gap, and then we talk a little bit about what their constraints have been, then we can prescribe the shortest, funnest, most productive path for them that way.
Charlie, tell us, what are some of the most common areas of improvement that you see in the businesses you work with?
Well, I'll tell you, last year I had 11 retained clients, and mathematically they grew on average revenues about 50%. Profit quite a bit, but a lot of them didn't have good accounting, and they really weren't confident in their profit numbers, which is a whole nother message that all 3 of us, public service announcement, you really need to pay attention to your accounting, and you want to have your accounting rock solid for 3 years before you want to sell. Otherwise, it's like punching yourself in the face in a street fight. It's like you're just saying, hey, look, give me your objections. Tell me how much less you want to pay for the business, or how much less you want to trust me. So having solid EBITDA numbers or software or owner-defined benefit numbers are really, really important.
Absolutely, Charlie. I've got to reiterate this. Work on those financials. Make sure you've engaged a good accountant and understand them, number one. We do end up seeing a lot of business owners who don't have quite a good handle on their financials. So make sure you're taking time to understand those financials and that you're working through them so they're nice and tight and accurate. Because if you are considering selling at any point in the foreseeable future, that is stop number one, and that shows the financial health of your business. Charlie, I know you know this. I'm repeating this for the audience because it's so important. And oftentimes, this is something we sit around and talk about as advisors who see these issues and over again come up in businesses. And we want to keep you out of trouble, those of you who are listening. We want to keep that headache away from you. So we focus on that early in the planning process, like that. You're doing yourself a huge favor.
And Nikki, Dave, and Charlie are so passionate about this that each of us spends weeks or hours every week meeting new advisors that we can get to know, like, and trust. So we do it through a professional organization that we belong to called Provisors, which is fantastic if you're a professional advisor. That's why I founded the Exit Advisor Alliance, is I want to see these people talk about problems in case study format and in problem solving format when it's not a real owner's life at risk. So I get to see how well they handle someone questioning them and how well they can present a new complex idea, and that they're auditioning for the owners that I recommend them to. But I will tell you that of last year, of 11 businesses that I work with owners, not all of them were in exit planning, but I still introduced a new accountant to 8 of them.
That's excellent.
That's just the state of owners and their accountants. It's easy in your early days to run the business like a piggy bank. But when you want to run a business that's going to leave a legacy, you get professional accounting and you start paying attention and you don't start charging, lots of extraneous events that just open questions in the future. You start treating the business like an asset where 80% of your net worth is really locked up in.
That's exactly right. Stop running those grocery receipts through the business, the country club memberships, the, people on the payroll who aren't doing anything.
Putting the addition on your house,
yeah. But Nikki, you had asked me the question. So what types of problems? And we got hit, accounting and the valuation of the business. I do want to throw out a couple others. Most business owners that are in their 50s and 60s want to work fewer hours. And they got to where they're at by being the doer. Well, that's two problems. One, it wears you out a lot. And secondly, it diminishes the value of your business if you're doing the selling and you're doing the delivery of the product, or if you're integrally involved with the accounting and the operations. So a big reason that what coaches do is that's usually the problem we solve. When businesses hit their stall point, it's because the owners become the bottleneck. I help as a coach, the owner navigate that and work fewer hours and get more done, be better at delegating, be better at explaining things and that. And then the other thing I want to put in there, it gets back to this mindset. A lot of my owners have been with me for multiple years. And what I started noticing is that they were getting paralyzed and they were coming back to meetings after they agreed to executing a plan that they came up with that we both know was fantastic, but week after week, month after month, not a lot of progress. And what I started learning is that they had these blocks in their mind that the positive intelligence system, a system by a guy named New York Times author called Shirzad Shamim, there's these 10 saboteurs that we all have in our brains. Judge, I'm a hyperachiever, I'm a hypervigilant, I'm always watching for what can go wrong. Other people are avoiders or procrastinators. But these tendencies that we have programmed into our brain are a lifetime of bad habits. So over about 6 weeks, I work clients through that, and I literally measure in a software app the percentage of positive to negative thoughts. And what we find, and the whole premise with the methodology, is about 80% of our population is operating nowhere near its potential because we have a mix of too many negative thoughts. So we literally reprogram the brain to be more positive. So my personal experience when I took it is I went from a 37, that means 63% of the time I was thinking negative things, to about 81. And it's made a huge difference in my life. So those are the areas that most of my clients want to work on: revenue growth, business, the valuation of the business, the time they spend in the business, or their mindset and happiness.
And with those engagements, Charlie, I mean, how do you measure success? And I mean, aside from the financial indicators, obviously, there's an increase in revenue, profit, that those are obvious ones. But those engagements where we don't have the financial indicators to look to, how do you measure success with your clients?
Well, the thing is, there's performance indicators that you're referring to, and then there's results indicators. And we collect those in a lot of different ways. But in a bigger company that wants to scale, we've mentioned that I use EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System. And in about a third of my engagements, I implement a software dashboard, either one called Focal Point Focus that takes the strategic plan, distills it down to business goals, and then goals by each operating executive, and they can distill the goals down to all their direct reports so that you get alignment and accountability of all your team. So I use Focal Point Focus for that. And then I also use 90, which is a third-party software that you can plug in any coaching methodology. But I use it to measure the results indicators. So for the benefit of your listeners, if a performance indicator is increasing your revenue by 50%, a goal could be to double the number of sales conversations you have, or to double the size of your average customer order. You set that goal and you measure that on a week-to-week basis, and you monitor progress through the time. That's a pretty technical answer. For those of you that aren't watching, Nikki and Dave were nodding off. Dave's head was against his computer.
No.
Oh, not at all. I think that's such
unmute
great
myself.
information, Charlie, that you are sharing, and I think it's important that people appreciate like how much you're putting into this. I mean, you're measuring so many things that I think business owners aren't even thinking about in their business to be able to look to and say, okay, what did we do in our time together? How have we improved since last year? I mean, being very technical is very good here, showing them how much work and progress you've done. Sometimes that's challenging, especially when they may be focused on just one particular thing and that's it.
Well, and Nikki, hitting on my why. So I got into coaching because I thought owners need a trusted guide with a good plan. But I had already had a couple good exits. I was part of selling one business where I was the number 2 exec for $330 million. No, I didn't take a big chunk of that. So for those of you that are financial planners, don't call.
You're going to get calls, Charlie.
But the point was, I got far enough along with success that when my wife and I decided to get into our next act, this was our purpose for being. I do this because I can't golf. When I golf, people ask me if I'm feeling okay. So for me, fun is dealing with ambitious business owners or executives that are just blocked and seeing them flourish. So I do invest a lot in this. It's not an hourly thing. Generally, between the hour calls I have with clients or half-hour calls or some group sessions, I'm doing a lot of work and research because this is what keeps me young. And for those of you that are watching, I'm 103 years old, but I look much younger.
All right, Charlie. So because you're going to be around for another 150 years, give people a place where they can contact you. How can people get in touch with you if they want to hear more from Charlie Jaynes, get their mindset right, get an exit plan going, figure out their emotional intelligence so that they know how to treat their team and the right way to manage their people? Where can they get more from Charlie Jaynes?
Yeah, so my phone number is 650-867-0207. And my email is cjanes@focalpointcoaching.com. And I also have a website that you can look up. And I'm going to send Dave and Nikki some other links, but I have an assessment on those 10 saboteurs, which you can take that assessment at no charge. And I will have a half-hour consultation with you at no charge, just simply to help you get on your way of a good mindset.
All right, wonderful. We're going to put all of that information in the show notes. So if you want to take the assessment on the 10 saboteurs, that's down in the show notes. Charlie Jaynes' contact information down in the show notes, his phone number, his email address. It has been an absolute pleasure having Charlie Jaynes with us today. If you're interested in CEO coaching, if you want to transform your mindset or just have a really good sounding board to bounce things off of, Charlie Jaynes is the guy. If you're interested in talking about a strategy for exiting your business, Charlie Jaynes is the guy. If you live in Florida and you want to get around other exit advisors, Charlie Janes is the guy. And apparently, if you're interested in EOS, Charlie Janes is the guy for that too. He's the guy for all of these things. His contact information is down below. Charlie Janes, thank you for joining us today on the Inside BS Show. My name is Dave Lorenzo. I am the godfather of growth, and she is
Nikki G.
We'll see you back here again tomorrow for another great edition of our show. Thanks for joining us, and until then, here's hoping you make a great living and live a great life. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Inside BS Show. My name is Dave Lorenzo. If you'd like to apply to be a part of our community, please join us by completing your application directly with me on the phone. You can call me at 786-436-1986, 786-436-1986. I can't wait to speak with you. Join us by calling me today.